Several things about this case are landing at the same time tonight, and by tomorrow, the biggest one of all finally arrives. A boat pulled away from a remote Mississippi island at 4:31 in the afternoon. It had brought 4 teenagers out that morning. It came back with 3. Nobody flagged it down. Nobody called for help right away. The boat just kept moving. Back to the dock, into a nearby bayou, back to the dock again, then over land to a house across the water. Hours passed before anyone reached out to the Coast Guard at all. 2 days later, searchers found what was left to find. An 18-year-old who never missed a family dinner, never once broke his word to his teammates, was gone. Since then, this case has pulled in federal agents. A sitting judge has said her own family is now living under threat. A young woman who stayed quiet for weeks has finally said, directly, what she actually knows. And tomorrow morning, his family will lay him to rest, with 2 autopsies still unfinished and no official answer for how he died. Tonight, before that happens, we're going through everything that's landed, carefully, and separating what's actually been confirmed from what's still just being said. Quick note before we get into it. This case involves the death of a young person, and some of what we'll cover tonight is genuinely heavy. Take care of yourself while you watch, and step away if you need to. If this is your first time here, welcome. Drop a comment and let us know what city or country you're watching from tonight. And if you've been with this channel for a while, sharing these updates, commenting, hitting that subscribe button, thank you. You're the reason cases like this one don't just disappear from the conversation once the headlines move on. Let's start with who Nolan actually was, because in the noise of an investigation like this one, that part gets lost fastest. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old, 6'1", and about to start his sophomore year at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he played wide receiver and studied general business. Before that, he spent 4 years at Ocean Springs High School, where he became a 2-time all-region wide receiver. Over his junior and senior seasons, he caught 63 passes for 724 yards and 10 touchdowns. His high school coach, Jake Bramlett, has said publicly that Nolan carried himself with humility, treated people with respect, and led by example without needing to say much at all. A former teammate, Sherroyd Whitehead, who grew up with him, called him one of the most respectful people he's ever known. He was supposed to report back to campus the Monday after this trip to begin preseason practice. He never made it. His father, Elmore Wansley, has talked publicly about something he taught all his kids growing up. If you go out with a group, you come back with the group. He said Nolan knew that rule, lived by it, and that's exactly why the family can't reconcile how their son ended up alone on that island. His mother, Christine Wansley, has spoken about how hard these weeks have been on her and on Nolan's siblings, in ways that don't need embellishing to land. That's who was on that boat on the 4th of July. Now here's where it happened. Horn Island sits about 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It's federally protected land, part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, known for untouched beaches and quiet fishing spots rather than crowds. For people who live on the coast, a boat trip out there on a holiday weekend is about as ordinary as it gets. That federal designation matters later in this story. It's part of why agencies like the Coast Guard and, eventually, the FBI get involved automatically, not because anything unusual was suspected from the start. Now, the day itself. According to GPS data obtained from Mississippi's Department of Marine Resources, the boat carrying Nolan and his friends left the dock at 9:56 that morning and arrived at Horn Island just over an hour later at 11:14. Nolan was last seen around 3 that afternoon, wearing blue swim trunks and sunglasses. At 4:31, the boat left the island. He wasn't on it. From there, the GPS shows exactly where that boat went, back to the original dock, then into Fort Bayou, back to the dock a second time, then to a boat launch on Fort Bayou itself, and finally, traveling over land to the home of the boat's owners in Biloxi. Every leg of that route is documented. What isn't documented, what nobody has been able to explain, is why a boat carrying 3 teenagers instead of 4 made that entire trip without anyone raising an alarm along the way. Reporting has described 3 other teens as being on that trip with Nolan. One of them is connected to a name that becomes important later in this story. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole is the stepmother of one of those 3. Beyond that connection, the other teens involved haven't been identified by name in mainstream reporting, and their individual accounts of that day have shifted somewhat as the investigation has gone on. We're not going to speculate about why. We're just going to note that it's happened. Now, the search. A friend called the Coast Guard around 11 that night, July 4th, but the Jackson County Sheriff's Office didn't formally request Coast Guard assistance until around noon the next day. That's roughly 13 hours between the first call for help and an official multi-agency search beginning. Nobody has offered a detailed public explanation for that gap, and we're not going to fill it in with guesses. It's simply part of the record. Once the search did begin, it involved the Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and volunteers from a group called the United Cajun Navy, which has a long history of stepping in on Gulf Coast search efforts. On the morning of July 6th, a park ranger found Nolan's body in the water off the northwestern tip of Horn Island. Dental records were used to confirm his identity. In the early days of the investigation, the sheriff's office said publicly that no foul play was suspected. That single phrase set off a wave of backlash online, with many reading it as investigators closing the door on the case before it had even really opened. A coroner later clarified what that statement actually meant, that there were no obvious, visible signs of trauma on his body at the scene. Not a finding, not a conclusion about cause or manner of death, just an initial observation, misunderstood by a public that had almost no other information to go on. That distinction matters, and it's one of the first examples in this case of a gap between what was said and what was heard. Before we go further, 2 claims that spread early in this case turned out not to hold up, and it's worth clearing them up before moving forward, because they shaped a lot of public opinion for days. The first was a photo showing Nolan at a pool party, which many people took as proof he'd been seen alive well after the 4th of July. Rolling Stone looked into it, using image metadata and an account from his friend Tristan Shepard, and confirmed the photo was actually taken about a week before the trip, on June 27th. The second was a viral audio clip many believed captured Nolan in an argument shortly before he vanished. Shepard has said, repeatedly and on the record, that the voice in that clip is his own, not Nolan's. Both of those claims spread fast and were both wrong, and that pattern, unverified information filling a gap that officials hadn't filled yet, shows up again and again in this case. It's worth keeping in mind for everything that follows. Here's how this went from a local story to a national one. Nolan's family retained civil rights attorney Ben Crump within days, which brought a wave of national media attention almost immediately. A GoFundMe set up to help the family passed $230,000 within about 2 weeks. Advocacy groups began publicly calling for a transparent, thorough investigation, and several major national outlets have also reported on another dimension of this story, that Nolan was the only black teenager in a group of white friends, and that the case has become part of a larger, ongoing national conversation about race. We're noting that here because it's part of how this story has been covered, not because we're drawing a conclusion about what happened on that island. That's simply not something anyone, including us, currently has the evidence to say. Now, to the FBI. For weeks, exactly why federal agents were involved in this case had only been explained in fragments. This week, the FBI's Jackson Field office finally put out a complete, on-the-record statement. It says the agency has assisted with certain aspects of the investigation using federal tools and partnerships, but that the Jackson County Sheriff's Office is leading, and will continue to lead, the case. It describes a long-standing working relationship between the 2 agencies, and it specifies exactly where the FBI's efforts have been focused: on interstate threats received by individuals connected to this case. That detail matters a lot. It means federal involvement here isn't about Nolan's death directly. It's about protecting people connected to this story from threats serious enough to cross state lines, which is what actually triggers federal jurisdiction in a case like this. Sheriff Ledbetter has separately confirmed the FBI is also assisting with digital evidence review and pointed out that federal involvement isn't unusual here at all, since Horn Island itself is federal land. What the FBI's statement doesn't do is specify what those threats actually said or exactly who received them. And that gap has been filled, at least in part, on the record, by one very specific person. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, the stepmother we mentioned earlier, connected to one of the 3 teens on that boat, has publicly confirmed that her own family has received death threats over this case. Treston Shepard has said the same thing, that he and other friends of Nolan's have also been threatened. Beyond those 2, some other reporting describes additional threats made toward people connected to this case, but those details haven't been confirmed by any official source, so we're treating them as unverified for now. What is not in question is this: threatening a family, a teenager, or a sitting judge over a case like this one is a serious crime, no matter how strongly anyone feels about what may or may not have happened to Nolan. And every threat like this makes it less likely that anyone still holding information will feel safe enough to come forward with it. Now, to the development that shifted this case the most this week. Katie, the young woman who spoke with Nolan in his last confirmed minutes on that beach, has finally spoken directly, not through a relative, not through a social media post, but face-to-face with Nolan's own mother, Christine. Up until now, everything attributed to Katie had come second-hand, filtered through a family friend, then through Katie's own mother and sister, posting online to correct rumors that had spiraled out of control. This meeting is the first time her account has traveled directly from her to the person who needed to hear it most, with nobody standing in between. And her actual account, according to Christine, is more specific than a lot of the public conversation around it. Katie has said, consistently, that she and Nolan spent time together that day and eventually parted ways. She got back on a boat with her own friends. Based on what Nolan told her, she assumed he was heading back to rejoin his own group, but she never actually saw him get on that boat. She assumed it, based on their conversation, not because she watched it happen. That distinction is genuinely important. It means Katie isn't offering a direct eyewitness contradiction to what his friends have said. She's offering his stated intention. Whether he followed through on that intention before whatever happened next is something nobody, not Katie, not his friends, not his family, has been able to confirm. Both things can be true. He may have meant to rejoin the group, and something may have changed in the time after that conversation. What actually happened in that gap is still the real mystery here, and it remains unresolved. Let's move to where the legal side of this case actually stands, because there's more happening here than most people realize. Following a meeting on July 15th between Nolan's parents and Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath, Attorney Ben Crump confirmed the case will eventually be presented to a grand jury once the underlying investigation is complete. He's also confirmed a coordinated review of Nolan's phone, with his own independent investigators and law enforcement examining it side by side. It's worth explaining plainly what a grand jury referral actually means, because it's been widely misunderstood. It is not a trial, it is not a verdict. It's a legal process where evidence gets presented to a group of citizens who then decide whether formal charges are warranted. In Jackson County specifically, this kind of referral is described by at least one local attorney as standard procedure for any death considered unnatural or suspicious, not proof by itself that foul play has been confirmed. A different legal voice, former Judge Carlos Moore, has pushed back on treating this referral as meaningful progress at all, citing his own concerns with this specific prosecutor's office in an unrelated past case. Both of those perspectives are worth holding at the same time. This can be standard procedure, and it can also be worth watching closely. As for why the physical evidence is taking so long, there's a simple, unglamorous explanation. An autopsy was conducted by the state on July 7th, but its findings are still waiting on toxicology results, which get processed by outside labs and can take 2 to 3 weeks or longer, sometimes much longer. A second, independent autopsy, arranged by Crump's team and funded in part by former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, was expected as early as July 10th. As of tonight, on the eve of the funeral, neither set of results has been made public. That means Nolan's family is about to bury their son without a confirmed cause of death, without a confirmed manner of death, and without any official determination of what happened to him on that island. That's not a dramatic flourish. That's simply where this stands right now. Tomorrow, Monday, July 20th, Nolan Wells will be laid to rest at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs. Visitation runs from 9 to 11 that morning, with the service beginning right after. Reverend Al Sharpton is expected to officiate. Filmmaker Tyler Perry covered the funeral costs for the family. There's a detail worth including here that's easy to miss. The Mississippi Coast Coliseum and Convention Center had actually offered its venue for the service, and its board voted to approve that offer. The family ultimately chose Center Point Church instead, and the Coliseum's response wasn't offense or awkwardness. Its executive director, Sam Voisin, released a statement extending condolences and support to the family regardless of their decision. That kind of response, from an institution that never knew Nolan personally, says something about how this community has shown up around this family that's easy to overlook in the middle of everything else happening in this case. So here's where things actually stand tonight. The FBI has now put its role in this case fully on the record, confirming real assistance with digital evidence and specifically with threats made against people connected to this story, while making clear that Jackson County remains firmly in charge of the investigation itself. Katie has finally spoken directly to Nolan's mother, offering an account that's more nuanced than most of the public conversation has suggested, an assumption about his plans, not a first-hand confirmation of what happened after. A sitting judge and at least one of Nolan's friends have confirmed receiving threats connected to this case, serious enough to draw federal attention. And tomorrow, Nolan Wells will be laid to rest, with 2 autopsies still unfinished and no official determination of how he died. 2.5 weeks ago, this case was mostly rumor, screenshots, and second-hand claims, filling a silence nobody official had stepped into yet. This week actually changed that. A federal agency spoke on the record. A key witness was finally heard directly. And for the first time, there's real clarity around what's confirmed and what still isn't, even without a single resolved answer. We're going to keep following this. Both autopsy results, the grand jury outcome, and whatever comes next, we'll bring it to you as it's actually confirmed and not a moment before. Thank you for watching all the way through tonight. If this update helped you actually understand where this case stands, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. We'll see you in the next one.
More on the mysterious death of Nolan Wells. We're joined by his parents, Christine and Elmore Wansley, as well as their attorney, Ben Crump. And before we get started, first off, I want to thank you for being here under these circumstances. I know how extremely tough it must be, and we can express how sorry we are for you and your family. And first question, how are you two holding up?
Taking it second by second.
Day by day.
Second by second and day by day, which we all can understand. And I just want to ask you, the friends that Nolan traveled to Horn Island with, they say that he stayed behind voluntarily. Why would he stay behind?
That we cannot answer. I can't fathom why he would. I
don't know why he would. We always taught him to, if you go with a group, you stay with a group. Mm-hmm. Even when he was in college, he would say, Dad, well, we're gonna ride down to a party or something in another city. Now, so I was out telling him, look, if you go with 5, you come back with 5. Do not separate from your group. Because I always say safety is in numbers. Mm-hmm. And He always said, yes, sir. So he knew to stay with his group. So why would he split from his group? I don't know.
So that would have been unusual for him to split from the group.
Yeah.
And you said he would always check in with you. Did he check in with you that day?
So that day, no, I don't. But of course, too, they were on the boat, and usually when he is out there, which it's not uncommon, he's I think since last year he's been going there occasionally with his friends, and so it would always just be like, "Hey, Mom, I'm back," type of thing. But this time there was no call or text from him. It was from his friend.
And then too, really didn't worry a lot about it because it was his last weekend to have fun.
Yeah.
Because that Monday he had to report to school. We was preparing to take him back for camp to prepare for the season. So, we're gonna see. He wanted to have his last hurrah before he locked down and get ready for the season. Because, like I said, the entire summer he's training. He got more serious. He started to understand what I was trying to tell him about football, not just being fun, but as you get farther in it, it becomes a business. If you want to excel, you have to understand, and you have to understand both at the same time.
And we know, Ben, that you said that you're going to do an independent investigation.
Yes.
And you say you have Nolan's cell phone and messages were deleted. How could you tell messages were deleted?
Well, his parents got the phone back, and that's something that's important, Michael, because they tracked this phone on Life 360.
So Life 360, but when I received the phone call from Warren, I immediately called my friend Tashima, and I said, "Hey, have you guys seen Nolan?" Because her two sons, Jalen and Javon, they grew up together. They played City League sports together. When they got into school, they played sports together. And so she was like, hey, okay, the boys were pulling up the location from Snapchat. So the Snapchat location looks completely different than the Life 360 location. So when I pulled up Life 360, it was different. It was showing everywhere the phone had been. I was like, well, it's showing that he's back on land. I'm not. He's like, but no, he didn't come back with us.
Well, how were you able to get the phone?
So we tracked it, and my friend Tashima went and picked it up.
It wasn't like they said we got his phone. They tracked it, and that highlights all these contradictions, Michael. The fact that they said Nolan was talking to a young woman, and she said that he said, I'm going back to get on the boat with the boys. The boys said that he said he was going to stay with her. And so that's an obvious contradiction. And then this video of this, you can hear an argument going where Nolan is saying, give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing? And so then his phone ends up missing. I don't know any teenagers, Michael Strahan, who says, if you believe their story, I'm gonna stay behind and I'm gonna leave my phone. I mean, no young person leaves their cell phone. And so then there's so many things their parents were telling us about, even why didn't his body wash up with the tide on Sunday? Why would it come on Monday? It's not adding up. And that is the problem when you think about the history of Mississippi.
Yeah, so there are so many questions that need to be answered. And is there anything you'd like people to know about Nolan? What would you like them to know about your son?
No,
It's okay.
Nolan, take your time. Nolan was very loving. He was liked by all. It was not a friend that he couldn't make.
No, we'll be right back with more for the parents of Nolan Wells and attorney Ben Crump. We're back now on GMA with the parents of Nolan Wells, Christina and Elmore Wansley. And I want you to please continue to tell us what you want the world to know about your son.
So Nolan was just like this bright light, right? Walk into a room, his smile, his energy was just so infectious. It's almost like he drew you into him. And he was just one of those people, he always wanted everyone to be included. He didn't want anyone to feel left out. I remember one of his teachers emailing us. I can't remember what grade he was in, but basically it was math class. They had a special needs student, and she asked a question, and Nolan got everyone to put their hands down because he wanted that student to answer. And so student answers the question, and she was like, Christine, the classroom, Nolan went crazy, and everyone else started going crazy, just celebrating that child, making them feel included. And that was the person he was. Like, he loved everyone. And I always told Nolan, like, you know, you have to be careful when you have such a big heart like that. I love that God blessed you with that, but you have to be careful with that, because, you know, that it's not always returned, that type of love. But he was just genuinely a good person. Like, I always say, all the best parts of me are with him.
And Dad, anything else you want to add?
It's just, he's gonna be really missed. I know a lot of his teammates, they all looked at him as a leader. He's more like a silent leader. Not real big on words, more action, which is kind of like I was. I really wasn't real big on talking. I really wanted to show you, and you follow me, and people followed him. And it's gravitated. He put in the work, he worked hard, and he knew he was focused on what he wanted. And he wanted to make life better for, you know, his family. He wanted to have his own family. He used to say, Dad, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. I said, well, son, you got to take it one step at a time. Slow down, let's go, let's walk this thing out. You know, let's train, let's sign our deals, let's make these teams, make these camps, put the work in, and everything else will work out. Even his baby brother, their bond got even stronger, because now I have a big brother that he's finna do something, so now I want to outdo that. So his focus and his confidence has got even better. So I was looking forward to both of them having outstanding years.
Seasons,
He seemed like he inspired in the home, and he inspired outside of the home. And Attorney Crump, where do we go from here? What's next?
Well, the deleted messages that Christina was going to briefly touch on, we want to get the phone and figure that out.
Backtrack on that. When we finally got his phone, me and my sister went through the phone. We went in his Snapchat. He had 2 accounts, absolutely nothing. It wasn't even 24 hours, which is how long videos and pictures stay in Snapchat. And I was just like, that can't be. Like, I've seen Nolan whenever he snaps, like when he goes and he's having fun, like he does videos. Like, there was absolutely nothing, no saved videos. And even my sister was like, yeah, that's suspicious,
Michael,
you know.
We're having an independent autopsy done at the behest of his family. Colin Kaepernick helped pay for the independent autopsy. We flew his body up from Mississippi to D.C. because they wanted an autopsy done by a person with no interaction with the Mississippi law enforcement, because they're